want to emphasize the fact that all of us as Austinites, as people living in Texas, have historical ties to this school, because before it was a school, you mentioned very briefly, it was the armory to the Republic. And after that, it was deeded to Austin to serve as an educational space in perpetuity, but we know where that went off with having covenants. So I do caution about this whole covenant idea. I digress. But we saw in the past that even having covenants means like people do not respect them. And I want to point out that right now AISD is struggling in terms of finding space for a lot of the historical material and ephemera that is in these schools that are closing because of gentrification. Also, the schools that are changing names that were once under Confederate rule. There needs to be some sort of space to honor that history. I'm not saying honor all Confederates, but choosing some article to be represented at the Palm School of AISD's history, of the educational aspects of Austin and all the things that we've done as educators to help lift students up. So I want to implore everyone here to consider just that idea of preserving AISD history in this place that used to belong to AISD.
My name is Anita Quintanilla. I'm on the advisory board. I went to Palm School in the 50s and early 60s and grew up on Rainey Street. And I just want to emphasize the importance of, the city really owes us big time. They owe us big time because of all the racist city policies have held us back. And we were moved from the Mexican neighborhood in West Downtown, and we were that was like the slums. Mexicans were working like slaves, and they served and they built this city to the greatness that it is now. So we owe them. We owe my grandparents and my great-great-parents and all these thousands of people that work, to the bone, giving their blood, sweat, and tears. And so I just want to emphasize how the city really owes us. And there's short real estate value, but there is the moral issue. Yeah.
Strident here, but we're on the cusp of becoming St. Louis, Baltimore, Cleveland, whatever, if we don't develop our city correctly. And what is happening to us is that the city government has us taking care of the transients. Look at all the hotels and stuff that are being built. And when we did Waller Creek flood control, we were going to have all these parks. People can't get to the parks that are the people in Austin. The convention center is on Waller Creek, and they're looking at expanding it and giving it more frontage on Waller Creek. I mean, we really got to think about what Austin is going to be. We need a transportation system as well. But the cities, we've got to think about everybody that lives here now and that's lived here before. And I'm not knocking anything that people before did at all. But we're to cusp. If you look around the United States, most cities grow till they get to be about 1 million people. And then they hit a wall. Then they empty out. People go to the suburbs. You see it, Dallas, you see it in Atlanta, you see it pretty much everywhere. And we're kind of at that point because people are moving to the suburbs because there's no place to raise a family downtown. I live down here, there's no children in our building. We maybe should make Palm School a school again, quite frankly. We need some schooling, and that's really what we need all over the city right now. But anyway, it's just, I think we've got to think of the larger issues that are facing the city of Austin. And this is in the context of all of that. That means also, what do we do with the convention center? And one of the things that concerns me about this is the convention center is a very dead area. You go over there at night, except with exception of a few nights a year, you don't want to walk around there by yourself. It's pretty spooky. The crime is up.
I live across the street. You're preaching to the choir on this one. I went to the city and I told them repeatedly that if they want to expand the convention center, they had better make sure that all of the bottom floors have things like retail, restaurants, stuff like that. They better follow their own rules about activating the streetscape. because we're tired of having like these giant toads sitting in the middle of the neighborhood.
Yeah, but it's also, you gotta have people that live there all the time. We've gotta have residents that live downtown. Right now, we don't have residents, and as the transients come in, you have to just look around at the restaurants around the convention center. They close regularly. There's no infrastructure to stay downtown, and that's gonna be a problem for us.
One of the concerns that I have seen over the last couple of decades maybe, is the privatization of public lands. And what's happened is, it may be public land, but you've got a foundation or a conservancy, or you've got something else that's been created that will be responsible for that public land. It's not in the public hands anymore. It's in the private boards of publicly created entities that are not tied to the people. Okay? We're not invited to the Waller Creek Conservancy board meetings. We don't have a vote with the Waller Creek Conservancy agenda items or board actions. And so with respect to that, that's also another thing that people need to take into consideration. We have Parks Foundation, we have Waller Creek Foundation, we have all these things, but it's a privatization tool that the city is using. Maybe it's because they don't want, or whomever, whatever governmental agency, entity it is, whatever it is, it's taking away direct control from the people, from the public, to a private board and commission. Okay, so this is something that we really need to look at, because those are the people that are involved in the development, in the planning, and in the presentations that are being made. You know, not necessarily to Joe Blow or Juan Jose, whatever, on the street. Those are being made to the elected officials who are or to the developers who are going to be responsible for what happens there. And I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just taking that's another layer that is insulating us, a common citizen, from direct action to the elected officials who are supposed to be the stewards for those public lands. And I think that's something that also needs to be taken into consideration.
Was not in the best manner or in the best objective, because from the very beginning, it has to do with a restricted sale or long-term lease from the county. So again, like what Cynthia is saying, it's like the county is turning over its property, whether it's sale or long-term, to do what's supposed to be done. But the county is not really taking responsibility to serve the community within the cultural or historical realm. You know, I always ask, like, why doesn't the county, like, fund the arts or fund other services? Like, what does the county do? And, you know, I think the county offers a lot of sports and, you know, stuff like that. But I've looked into research of other counties and other cities. The county.
Community input, and also Commissioner Gomez, who sits on a governmental board, they can respond on how the community can be included in this process beyond this meeting today. Is anybody here from the
So
Conservancy?
there are a number of us here from the Conservancy, so I
Okay.
can speak to some of our perspectives
Yes.
on this. I think,
Do you own the land?
uh,
The county owns land.
so, you know, we, for those of you that don't know, the Waller Creek Conservancy is working with the City of Austin to revitalize the Waller Creek corridor, and specifically
And
the
Central
creek
Park.
itself and the series of parks that it connects between the lake and 15th Street. So Waterloo Park at the northern end, and Palm Park is one of the parks within the overall project plan for this Waller Creek project. So, you know, we have been engaged in thinking about and speculating about what the possibilities for the Palm School site are for a long time, because its adjacency to Palm Park obviously is really one example of actually where it played out, where when we went out to the community a couple of years ago with some initial ideas for Palm Park and what to do there, and our drawings were all showing the park sort of separate from Palm School, right? That because that was the part that the city owned. We didn't, the city as a part of the project didn't have control over Palm School site. So we're showing them separate. And the number one thing that we got from the community in that point was, we need to be thinking about these two things together, the park and the school. They were historically connected and they need to be thought of holistically. I think one of the things that you're, really important points that you've made is, in the same fashion, we need to look about this site on a number of levels, but in a much more holistic way, right? In terms of the
Big picture.
community history, the history of the building, but also its role in relationship to the city as a whole. It's such a specific and strategic site, and I think, there's such great opportunity for what we could do there for the benefit of the community in general. And so I think, to start thinking about all these strategic adjacencies and community histories that we could carry forward into the future in a positive way. So I think that's our perspective, is let's take as broad a view as possible and see how this site can fit into all these other aspects of the evolving city and carry the fast into the future.
Just a quick name. Had I not been sitting on the Second Health Board of Managers, Glenn Goss is here, he knows what I'm talking about. And when we're talking about the development of innovation centers, when we're talking about the development from the river, from the Colorado River, El Rio Colorado, to the medical school, and the development that's going to be ongoing on both sides of Interstate 35, downtown, all the way to the American Statesman Building, okay? All the way up 15th Street and beyond, ties to UT, et cetera.
Ms. Ford and to Judge Eckhart, that the citizens of Travis County are not done with that piece of land. We still have much work to do, and we don't want to sell it. Or maybe long-term lease, but we don't want to sell it right now. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to follow up. High financial value, where we have Latino historic cultural preservation value. We're overlooking that, and I'm very upset about it. My mother-in-law is shown here with a bunch of children from East Austin. She grew up on 9th Street, walking to Palm School. And then these are the pictures of her brothers, that first grade, second grade, third grade, and we're completely overlooking the value that Anita has described, and others that went to Palm School, Council Member Renteria. We're completely ignoring the personal, historic, and cultural value by pushing the agenda of selling the property or getting financial return on the property. We are mistaken, and we really need to reconsider this.
It goes back to when we sold Lincoln Juarez University, Juarez Lincoln University. And the community back in the 70s and 80s said, La cultura no se vende, which in English means our culture is not for sale. And so 50 years later, we're still having to come back and deliver that message that nuestra cultura no se vende.
Sure. I know we were trying to balance them all, but it sounds like some of you don't feel like that's possible. So please make sure you write that in your comments